moving to the US in 2025 worth it? Does the American dream still exist? That's what we're going to talk about in this video, where I share my experience after 2 years in Los Angeles. I'm going to share my honest opinions about why I think the US is still the greatest country in the world, but also many of the problems that this country have. So let's get into it, and feel free to drop some comments if you have other opinions. I'm happy to hear your input as well. So before getting into the pros and cons, I just want to tell you why I moved to the US in the first place. So for so many years, my dream was to move to the US. It was really just like some special feeling, and when people ask me, I don't really know why or what to say exactly, but I think it was just something just fascinated me for the first time I was in the US and until today. So that was kind of the feeling I had, and I came here a lot to the US for work and different things. And it was like I could kind of predict the rest of my life if I would just stay in Scandinavia, and I felt, why not follow my heart and challenge myself and make the move, even though it's far away, super difficult to get visa. But the worst thing that could happen is that I would move back to Scandinavia again if things wouldn't work out. So that's what I told myself, and then I started the whole process of the visa. And speaking of the visa, I made a lot of other videos where I talk about how to get the visa, but I'll just quickly talk about it here as well. So when I decided I wanted to start the whole visa process, I was looking into different options, like what kind of visa would be the right one for me. But the visa I got recommended that would be the best fit for me was the O1A visa, and I used the company Deal. And they helped me through the entire process and was really a great choice. It took a long time to get the visa, like around 1 year. This visa is for people that is entrepreneurs, actors, football players, or other types of individuals that is really strong in their field. So it's a very broad visa, but it's a really great visa because also it's the path to a green card afterwards. So this is basically how I got my visa. And if you have more questions about visas and all, feel free to drop a comment. Also check out some of my other videos where I go more in detail about how I used Deal to help me get my visa. All right, let's get into the list. So let's start with the positive things. And I think one of the most important things is that the American dream is still alive. It still exists. Of course, things are so different than 40 years ago or 20 years ago. And I don't know any details about this since I was not living in the US at that time. But of course, from what I understand, things are different. And maybe it is more difficult with the American dream today. But it is still possible. There is so many opportunities in the US, whether it is in California or it is in Texas or it is on the East Coast. There is a ton of opportunities. And I think really what is the most important thing to say here is working hard and be persistent, fighting. And I think really this is where the magic happens. And of course, this is not for everyone, but really if you are a person that is willing to put in the work, really to fight and be the best, then this is still the best place in the world, I think. Because again, the market is so big. There's so much money here and there's so much talent here. So if you can also come with your talent, then this is a perfect cocktail to have success. So this is probably one of the most important and exciting things about the US also in 2025, also with the problems that is with politics and other changes right now. Speaking of something I don't like so much is that it is really expensive. The last, I think 15 years or so, it have really changed, because I remember when I was in the US as a teenager, it was actually relatively cheap in the US, but then the last, 10, 15 years, it have just changed. So Europe is a lot more affordable and the US a lot more expensive today. And you can feel that you can easily spend hundreds of dollars in a day without thinking about it. You go to a restaurant, it doesn't even have to be a fancy restaurant, buy a few other things, and then that was $300, $400, $500. And here you really have to be careful, especially if you just moved to the US and maybe you don't have a high salary or you don't have that stability, so then you need to be really careful with your spending. You really need to kind of stretch every dollar in the beginning, I think, because it can really get expensive, especially in places like LA, super expensive. It can just go like that, and then you used all your money. So really this is something to be careful with, and definitely something that is better in Europe, where you can really still find some countries that is super cheap. The next thing is that Americans are super friendly people. Of course, this is very generally speaking. And again, I've spent most of my time in LA, so it's mostly based on that. But I think in general, people are super friendly. I think they're easy to talk to. I like the whole dynamic in the US culture where it is a little more easygoing. There's a bit more small talk, but I like this whole kind of energy that you can easily connect with people. There's people from all over the world. There's Mexicans, there's Europeans, there's Americans, there's all sorts of people there, all mixed together. I feel it's very easygoing when I'm there. It's so easy for me to connect with people and get new friends, versus in Scandinavia, that is super difficult. I lived for 3 years in Sweden, and I made 1-2 friends in all of that time. And I really tried all I could, but it's just a different culture and it can be a little difficult to explain. But in the US, it is a completely different flow and something I really like. The next thing is that it's far away from home. So I'm from Denmark, but I don't mind too much. But of course, sometimes I miss my family, that I have to take a 10-hour flight flight, or sometimes 15 hours if I have to have a layover as well. So this is of course something that is a little difficult sometimes, but I try to travel a lot to Europe so that I get to see my family 3 to 4 times a year. But of course this is one of the negative things of being on the other side of the planet. Before I was speaking about it's so expensive in the US, but on the other hand there's also so much money, and money is so much more accessible in so many ways, whether it is credit, investments, and so many other parts of the whole financial infrastructure. If you want to take a loan to something, it is much cheaper than it is in many places in Europe, because in Europe we have a different way of thinking. It is a lot more playing it safe, where in the US it is more taking risks, taking chances, but also having the consequences of things that are not going to work out. You will have completely different opportunities, but of course you also have to be careful. So again, this can be whether if you have a startup and you want to raise money, it is much easier in the US. You can raise money on an MVP. You don't have to have years of traction or anything like that. And again, if you want to loan money for you personally, that is also much easier. If I should give you one example, after being in the US for 3 or 4 months, I got a credit line of $5,000 to my credit card. And they knew basically nothing about me or my credit history, because now after being there for 2 years, I think I have a credit line of maybe $30,000 or $40,000 in total. And again, this would never happen in Europe, or it's very general to say all of Europe, but at least in Scandinavia, it doesn't work like that. You need to show up with all sorts of documents and all sorts of plans on how you want to finance these things before you would have the opportunity to get these kind of loans. And this of course is both a good and a bad thing, because sometimes people can't manage this, but generally speaking, it gives you a lot of opportunities. So if you use this money the right way, this can really bring you further in wherever you want to go. And then the next one on the list is that it's not as safe as Europe. And again, this is very general to say all of the US, all of Europe, and compare. But I would say in general, I think Europe is more safe. And the reason why I say this is because many of the countries in Europe are really safe, and you can walk around in the night. You don't have to be super careful. There is cities that is not safe. There is more guns. There is more violence. There is more robberies. So in general, it's not as safe in the US. Though I would say it's not something that is a super big concern for me, at least not right now. Maybe if I had kids, or maybe if I would have a physical store and I would sell products, maybe that would bother me, that I need all sorts of safety and insurance. But definitely in Europe, it is more safe. Another thing I really admire in the US is the mix of cultures. I think it is amazing that you have people from all over the world, people from Asia, people from Africa, people from Europe, and Latin America, and all of this mixed together in some cities. And of course, it's completely different where it is in the US, but I think this is something that is super exciting. And I love to learn from new cultures. I love when cultures are mixed together. And I think there's something really beautiful about it. And as an example, when you're from Denmark, a lot of the people are the same. They talk about the same things, they look like me, and it gets kind of boring to me. I think there's something super exciting about this mix of cultures. Then the next thing on the list of the negative things is the political situation in the US. So I think it's a little sad to see what's going on. I think there's a lot of tension. I think there's a lot of problems with the politics in the US. I think it's getting very negative. I think it's too much heart on heart, and not just having real conversations, respecting the opponent's opinions, and just like, respect opponent, and again, look out for what is best for the country, and not just all the time go hard on hard and just all this negative energy. I don't think that's not something I like. It's not something I represent. And I also don't think it's something Americans should represent, because I think a lot of Americans have something good in them and have a good heart. But I think some of this political tension have just made like negative waves that just makes it worse and worse. So I think really this is something that is not so good these days. But again, I hope things will change within not too long, whether it is when it's the next president or before that. Like, it's not really important to me. It's more that things gets better one way or another. The next thing on the positive list is that I love the nature in the US. So again, I've spent most of my time in Los Angeles and around Los Angeles, and I've done some trips, to Yosemite, Sequoia, Joshua Tree, amazing things. But of course also I went to many other national parks around in the US. And one of my next trips is to go back to Zion and Bryce Canyon. Earlier this year, I was in Grand Canyon. And also I want to go to so many more national parks, and just in general, I love just driving around in the US and enjoy the nature, go to national parks. I think this is really something magical and something I really enjoy. In Europe, I also love to do Europe trips where I just drive around and go to different countries and explore. I think that's also amazing, but it's just different, amazing, just in two different ways. But I really love traveling around in the US and enjoy the nature. It's really something that is important to me, to be surrounded by beautiful nature, to do a lot of hikes and be, in general in the nature. So something really I like a lot, and especially when you're from Denmark, where it's completely flat and the nature is not the most interesting, then it's something I'm really thankful for every day. So the last one of the list of the negative ones is that I feel Americans don't have the same moral as Europeans. I feel sometimes in the US people are not really keeping their promises. Maybe they say they want to pay for something, then they don't pay for it and they don't really care. Or let's say in Europe, people are so conscious about or careful about the environment. In the US, I don't feel people really care as much with these things. I think it's because they have like bad intention. I think it's just the culture is different. In the US, maybe more people have a little higher stress level and more like they need to protect their own life and make their income. So maybe for that reason, they don't have that extra capacity or moral to do the right thing. And sometimes they just think about themselves. So that can be a little bit of a negative thing, maybe. Not a big deal, but it's just about the culture is a little different in this way. So of course the US is not perfect. There's a lot of things that could be much better, but I would say it is still an amazing country, and yes, it is still worth moving to the US, whether it's 2025, 2026, 2027. It is an amazing country and still the best place in the world to follow your dream. If you work hard, if you're willing to put in that work that is needed, then it is the best country in the world. And I've been really thankful to be in the US and hopefully can stay there for a long time. And if you're a person that is thinking to make the move, wondering if it really makes sense in 2025, feel free to reach out, drop a comment if you have another opinion or a question. I'm happy to help you. Again, I also added links in the description to Deal, the company I use for my visa. They can help you more in detail with your case, talk about the different visa opportunities, and I'm sure they will be happy to help you. And also, if your profile in this moment is not strong enough, you can still work on your profile maybe the next 6 or 12 months and then apply. Maybe you just need to work a little bit on your CV or some of your experiences, and then you'll have enough to start the process. I think the last thing I just want to conclude about these pros and cons is that the US is really a place for people that is willing to fight. If you are an entrepreneur, you're a scientist, you're a singer, you're an athlete or whatever, or someone who is really specialized in your field, or you want to be the best, then still this will be the best place to go. And I really love that about this country. I think that is where the magic really happens here. I don't think that the US have a very strong culture, or the architecture is not pretty, and there's many other things that I don't think is the reason to be in the US. But the fact that they have this opportunity, and also I think that this whole thing about being the best place in the world for entrepreneurs, that there's so many investments being made in the Bay Area and also other places in the US, in Los Angeles or in Texas, in Miami and New York, so many other places. And this is amazing if you're an entrepreneur and you want to raise capital, or you just want to bring your business to the US. This is the best place to go as an entrepreneur. And I would recommend any other entrepreneur to try it out, to really challenge themselves, to see if they can also be successful here in the US. So I hope you found this video useful. I hope it gave you some insight. If you're a person thinking to make the move, then I hope this video gave you a little bit of insight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Christopher, and I'll see you very soon.